I think with male athletes also, it just becomes this like default thing that it's like once you reach a certain age, this is like all anybody wants to qualify everything with. So it's just like you can't not hear about Tom Brady and, LeBron James, which I also think is just another amazing thing about female athletes. Like we're doing all this in play. Obviously, my, fiance Sue Bird just retired this year, but played into her 40s on like literally like a fraction of the budget. I'm like, if I could spend $1 million on my body every year, I would play till I was 52.
And welcome back. You're listening to Hysteria. Alyssa, close your eyes.
They're closed.
Picture a soccer player. Don't tell me who it is. Don't tell me who it is. I won't. Do you have the soccer player?
I do.
It's Megan Rapinoe, right?
Obviously, it's why I tried to dye my hair pink and it looked bad on me.
Today's guest is one of the most iconic soccer players in history. She currently plays for the U.S. women's national team and the OL Reign. Seattle is lucky to have her. She's a 2-time World Cup champion, an Olympic gold medalist. But wait, I'm not done. She's also a New York Times bestselling author and an activist that stands up for causes near and dear to her, from equal pay to LGBTQ plus rights. This year, she received a 2022 Presidential Medal of Freedom. Megan Rapinoe, that has to be some kind of an EGOT.
Just another notch in the belt.
Welcome to Hysteria. We're so glad to have you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to put faces to your two's names.
Oh, thank you. I feel like you've kind of hit for the cycle when it comes for crooked podcasts. Like you're like the crooked podcast champion for sure.
I'm trying.
How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. I did more of a Friendsgiving type thing. I've sort of whittled down all the family stuff to like one time during the year. Probably not like ideal for my mom, but she knows and she understands. So actually my twin sister hosts Thanksgiving quite often. She lives in Portland. We're just up in Seattle. So just a short little drive. So it was really nice. Pretty chill. Had so much fun. Great food. Yeah, I was like the, chief of vibes and wine. Me and Sue are chief of vibes and wine, and we don't really do like all that much with like
food,
the things that actually need to be done, the food.
Vibes and wine are key, though. You need vibes and wine at Thanksgiving.
It's true.
Otherwise, like, what is there to be thankful for if not vibes? So we know it's a complicated time to be a fan of international soccer, and we'll get to that in a minute. But are you watching the World Cup, and has anything surprised you so far?
I have been watching the World Cup. I've been traveling a bit, so it's a little bit in and out. I haven't been watching every single game, but yeah, I've been watching the boys play, obviously. And yeah, watching all the games. Has anything surprised me? Not really. I think the games have been good. As you get into the knockout rounds, it just gets even better because no one's really, it's like you're only playing for the result that's in front of you. And that's just like the best when you get down to the knockout stages. It's all stressful and everyone's, amped up, but also stressed out. And, obviously for our men's team, having missed out on the last one, like you can just tell this group is so eager. They're so into it. Like they seem like they have really good vibes on the team. So it's been fun to watch them. And our midfield is just absolutely crushing it. They've been one of the best midfields in the whole tournament. So that's been fun to see. I think they're calling them MMA.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Musa, McKinney, and Adams in there. They're killing it. So it's been fun to watch them and see all these guys in their first World Cup, with the exception of DeAndre. Just to see them experience that and just knowing what that's like to go through it. It's just so much fun to watch them.
Oh, that's great. Do you have any other favorite teams besides watching the U.S.?
Yeah. France, I just had the France-Tunisia game on. France is just so much fun to watch. They just have so many good players. It's crazy. Really into them. Who else have I watched I've been into? I think our game against the Netherlands is going to be great. They have a couple really good young players and obviously one of the finest men on the planet, Virgil van Dijk. He's, locking it up in the back, so that'll be nice to watch. But who else? I feel like some of the smaller teams have been fun, or even some of the teams that are knocked out of the tournament. It's cool to see Wales. They're the population of, my hometown. Just kidding. My hometown's really tiny, but you get the comparison. That's cool to see them. And just seeing players score for the first time, or countries who have never even been, or countries who, barely get to go, or, are definitely going to be knocked out. It's fun to watch those teams and those fans. And Messi, of course. I can't believe I actually almost cried when Messi scored his goal. I don't know why. Sports sometimes just like really gets at me.
It's like a Pixar movie sometimes. It just like hits you right in the cry muscles.
Yeah.
And it's just like.
Yeah, exactly. So that's been fun. I really hope he wins. That would just be like so cool.
Yeah.
But not over our guys.
Yeah. Oh, of course not. I saw in the news recently that this Thursday at the Costa Rica-Germany match, there will be an all-female refereeing trio taking charge for the first time ever at a men's FIFA World Cup. Why do you think it took this long?
I mean, probably the same reason that the World Cup is in Qatar, to be honest. It's just general fuckery, general sexism, racism, discrimination.
Honestly, general
probably
fuckery.
That whole reason.
General fuckery
I
sounds
think that's
like
probably...
it could be the name of the person in charge of FIFA.
Totally.
That sounds like a real.
I feel like we're gonna get to.
I know. I think the top position is called General Secretary. Is that Gianni's like official title?
I think so.
Something like that. I feel like there's like a General Secretary in there. Yeah. And he doubled down and basically solidified himself as chief fuckery with his speech. That was insane.
Wow.
Oh gosh.
Speaking of fuckery and speaking of Qatar, Qatar's been making headlines for human rights abuses related to the World Cup since the country won the hosting spot in 2009, including allegations of utterly inhumane treatment of the workers sent to build the stadiums and overall infrastructure. It's obviously a tricky situation. What has the U.S. government's response been, and what lessons should our government learn going forward?
I don't really know what the response has been. I mean, it is a tricky, I feel like for the players and for the federation at least, you're limited when you're there because it's like you're not, and nor do I expect, nor would I encourage any of the players to, boycott. If the boycott was going to happen, it needed to happen like 10 years ago when this whole thing got awarded to Qatar. But when you're there, it's like they're not going to put themselves in jeopardy. They've obviously worked so hard to be there and have this opportunity. I think you needed to speak up about it like a long time ago and just continue to kind of like beat that drum, whether it's in press conferences or media leading up to, or in whatever way. I know they've been obviously really cracking down on any sort of, as if like a gay rainbow flag armband is going to like magically rub off on someone. It's just like literally absurd. I don't know what our government's been doing. I don't know if they're sending any real like formal delegations. I'm not sure if the president is going to any of the games. I haven't seen that. It's just like one of those things like, what are you supposed to do? This is like a major event. It's not going to not happen. We're not going to pull our men's team out of it. So hopefully just, players using their voice and making it known that even though they're there and obviously participating, that, they're against so many of just the atrocities that are happening, whether it's, just the human rights abuses that happen every day or the human rights abuses that happen in the lead up to the World Cup. It's like they're playing and everything that they're doing there was built by migrant workers in the last 10 to 12 years in this sort of nation building project. And so every single thing they touch is, whether it's roads or trains or hotels or the stadiums, it's all just, stained, unfortunately, by the deaths that have been sustained by a lot of these migrant workers. So it's just really, it's really tough. I don't, envy these players either. That's a really tough position to be in, or the federation. I mean, we saw what happened with the federation the other day with the asset that they put up about the Iranian flag, taking part of it out and then sort of having to immediately backtrack. I don't really know what it's kind of like if you're going to do something, just go all in and do it. I doubt that America would be kicked out of the World Cup. For continuing to do that. But I do understand the balance, but I think probably a lot more needed to be done in the last 10, 12 years than, while we're there in Qatar.
Consensus seems to be that the reason Qatar got the cup in the first place is that, as we alluded to earlier, FIFA is an incredibly corrupt and frankly dirty organization. Is FIFA rotten to the core, or can that which is fucked become unfucked? And how?
Can you unfuck a fuck situation? I mean, I think the structure of it is inherently corrupt and leads to, corruption, just like the voting, all the nations having, the voting rights, or I don't know exactly how it's done. Some of these nations will never go to the World Cup. And so like, what's their incentive? It's obviously a complete, monopoly on world soccer. So they just have all of the power. So they can sort of get done whatever they want to get done. It's sort of all run by just like friends and friends of friends. It seems like, I think they're like trying in a lot of ways to sort of clean it up, especially after all the scandals in the recent, last 10 years or so. But the World Cup being awarded to Qatar is just like blatant, out in the open, just corruption. It's kind of insane. And I think too, there's just they just don't care either. I just don't think there's any incentive really to care either. I've said this about FIFA before, and I've said this about Gianni. Like they just, if they care, they would do something different. If they care, they would never give it to a nation that, doesn't allow people to be gay, or that has, limited rights for women, and, a myriad of other things. So I just feel like there's not the incentive to do that. The incentive is all like, just how can I get as much power and as much money? And that's kind of how you do it. And not to mention the last World Cup was in Russia. I was like, this is insane. And the next World Cup's in America. What does that say? No, I'm not comparing Qatar and Russia to America by any means. Let's make that clear. But I think those two successive World Cups, say a lot about the state of soccer, and just in general, how soccer works, how European soccer works, how the sort of power structure in soccer works. It's just like, it's really just all money.
Mm-hmm. The U.S. women's national soccer team and women's sports in general are far more, if not the most, outspoken when it comes to political and social issues. Does it get exhausting to always be the ones fighting the fights?
Yes. Definitely.
Cool. That's what we thought.
We figured.
Exhausting. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, not only, we've said this, so many times, especially in our, pay equity fight with the federation, but it's like, this is not my job. This is not my job to, go to mediation, or to work on, a settlement agreement, or to, go on the Today Show at 4 a.m. or to do any of this, really. Well, also, it's like, my job is actually to play, the sport, and to, commit as much time and effort and sort of spirit as you can, to being the best that you can. So it is exhausting. With that said, it's like, that's just the way that it is. I think that's kind of what I tell people. It's like, yes, it's frustrating, and I wish I didn't have to do it. And hopefully what we've been able to do as a team the last few years will make it so that none of these players have to at least do that same thing. But it's kind of like, it just has to be done, unfortunately. That's just kind of where we are in the history of inequality in women's sports. And you do see it changing. So that is positive, and that's obviously progress and action, and that is motivating to keep going. So I think we have some real groundswell and motivation, and people understanding not only that it's just the right thing to do, but also, equality is good business, I think, at every opportunity. And so I think the business opportunities within women's sports are just growing exponentially. But yeah, it's exhausting. It's like, I don't have to be doing all of that. It would be great to put our creativity and our brain power and our effort somewhere else. But also, hopefully no one ever has to do that after us.
It's like your brain is like a Firefox with like a million tabs open, and you're like, can I just close some of these? Can I close some of these tabs? You're slowing my computer down.
I really.
So speaking,
when you get to your phone and you're like, oh my god,
so many
804 apps. Oh, I don't even have all these apps.
I've been checking Zillow again. Anyway, speaking of equality, what is the current status of the fight for pay transparency and equality in soccer and beyond? And how do we get people to care all year round, and not only when a World Cup happens every 4 years?
I mean, the status with our national team is very good. Obviously, we reached a settlement with the federation this year, joint CBA with the men's national team. So we have extra incentive to to root for them in this World Cup. We'll share in the prize money, and they'll share in our prize money in next year's World Cup. So that's in a really good place, and I think a really good place moving forward. I think there was a lot of pushback from a federation leadership standpoint for so long. And with Cindy Parlow-Cohn as the president, and just a lot of changeover in the board and the upper management, I think there's a much better understanding that this is, again, not only the right thing to do, but certainly good business. I mean, they spent tens of millions of dollars, probably upwards of $20 million fighting the lawsuit that they ended up paying $25 million for. So it's just, I mean, talk about fuckery. I always said that too. I'm like, you guys know this is not just like, it's just not going to end. It's just going to end in us getting equal pay and you having to pay us moving forward. So they learned that the hard way. Inequality is a bad bit of business. But that's in a really good place. With the league, the NWSL, it's a little bit different. I think just still fighting for that sponsorship and those dollars so people can be a fan of it all year long. It's like, if you don't know who plays on your team, if you don't even know there's a team, if you don't know how to get to the stream, like on, the deepest parts of the interwebs, which sometimes I'm just like, I play the sport, I don't know how to get to this stream. All of that is like infrastructure that's funded by money, whether it's branding, marketing, ticket sales, being in the best arenas or being in the best stadiums, marketing for the players, all of that. So I think that's kind of the biggest piece. And it's like, the product on the field is amazing. It's one of the best leagues in the world. You have a ton of superstars that play in the league. You have some of the best and the most recognizable, players in the entire world that play in the league. It's mostly just like getting people there. The product on the field is there. I mean, it's no surprise that the MLS, which is not the best league in the world and does not have the best product on the field, while it's growing, like they have all the money in the world. They've had literally billions of dollars of investment. So you build that fan culture, you build, allow that to cultivate, you sort of build the infrastructure around it. You make it an entertainment property. It's not just, some fans are super fans and they're going to watch no matter what in any sport. But really, it's like you see the NFL and you see it in the NBA and baseball. It's just an entertainment property. So the more you can bring people in and make them feel a part of that culture and that fandom, the more committed they'll be. And that honestly just takes money. People always ask, they're like, what's it going to take? I'm like, just money. I'm like, give me $1 billion of investment. I'll make it successful. That's for sure.
Megan, earlier this year, you joined the pay equity software provider Trusaic as its director of equality. What systemic problems does it seek to address and how?
Yeah, so Trusaic is a really cool company that I partnered with last year. It's like basically an HR technology company, and they are looking to end pay inequity, essentially. And this is something I feel like was kind of the next step in, not just what I was talking about, but the team was talking about. It's like, okay, so you've identified that there's pay inequity. What do you do now? And it's such a huge problem, obviously. That sort of compounds itself over time. So they have a couple really cool and really effective tools for companies to use, one of which is the pay parity solution, which sort of identifies the issue within the company. So if you have pay discrepancies, you can adjust for age and race and gender, sexuality. You can sort of toggle all of these different things. And then obviously looks to address that by being able to close that gap. So that's something that's really important, just understanding where the discrepancies are and where those gaps are in the company, being able to identify them. And then the other one is the equal pay estimator. I think oftentimes what happens is you don't know you're being underpaid, then you're underpaid, then it's compounding as sort of this overtime issue. But this helps sort of on at the time of hiring to, check all the boxes, fill everything in, and then actually give people a salary that is equal and sort of stopping the issue before it becomes an issue. So these two tools combined, I think, can really help companies, which I think companies do, want to be on the right side of things and do want to make things right, but it's such a huge issue. It's like, how do you do that? How do you identify it? What tools are you using? How do you make up those differences? How do you stop it from moving forward? And it can be a really just sort of difficult issue when you don't really have a system or a structure in place to address that. It's like, obviously, whatever system and structure is in place has been facilitating the inequality. So you need to sort of bring something else in to make sure that doesn't move forward. So I feel like kind of elevating it to the forefront. Another thing that we did, I came on as the chief equality officer, and not just as like a fluff position, but I feel like companies need to start adding this to the upper management and adding this to the most important voices. If it's just something that's like kind of on the side, or it's just in HR, like, frankly, it's just not going to be listened to. This person's not going to be listened to. They're not going to be able to implement what needs to happen. They need to be an integral part of the company. They need to be, in, the sort of top leadership to make sure that this is like one of the pillars of the foundation of the company, so that, everything can be built on top of that.
It's probably less expensive than getting sued and having to pay millions and millions of dollars.
Have the New York Times stalk your ass.
That way.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like really
exactly.
Kind of a gimme right there. So I've heard people and read people bandy about the idea of you maybe playing in the World Cup in Australia next year, pending whether or not you're dealing with any injuries. Can you give us an update? And how are you feeling about the possibility of playing in next year's World Cup?
I really want to play in next year's World Cup. I felt like I had a really good year this year. Was able to stay healthy. I'm not going to be able to have the same kind of role. I've talked about this a lot, the same kind of role that I had before, obviously getting a wee bit older, 37 now, I'll be, 38 by the time, sort of the middle of the World Cup next year. But I feel like there is a role for me. And not just, mentorship, of course. And, we have a pretty young team, and being able to hopefully put everything in my brain and all the experience that I have to the younger kids, but also still being able to play at a really high level. The World Cup in Australia is going to be, Australia and New Zealand co-host, is just going to be insane. It's going to be, such an amazing time. I feel like with the Women's World Cup too, every year, because of the investment and, the care taken and just the way the sport is growing, every World Cup is just like exponentially better than the last one. So I'm hoping to be there. Obviously, it'll have to be, health and selection willing, but I feel like I have a really good opportunity, and looking forward to being a part of a really special group going forward next year.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it too. So this is, you bring up age, and as women, we get messages for our entire lives that our worth is tied to our youth. For a lot of us, we've internalized this idea that it's tied to our fertile years. So until we're 40, and then somehow we just disappear. We no longer exist.
Yeah, just turn into dust.
Right, exactly. We become invisible. But as an athlete, I'm sure you get it twice, because you're a woman and an athlete. How do you age without it messing with your head? Have you ever freaked out about getting older before realizing, wait a second, I'm only 37?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I feel like I sort of toggle between I'm 37. I'm still out here, balling on you little young kids. What's your excuse? My teammate Rose Lavelle, she's like, if you're going to keep saying you're 37, you better start acting like it. So there's a little bit of pride, there's a little bit of pride involved in, still being able to do, what I love at a very high level. And I think also just the training and the sports medicine and everything is just, grown so much and become so good. I think we need to just, even on the men's side, adjust our sort of expectations of when athletes, are starting to decline, because we see it. Obviously, you hear about it all the time on the men's side. It's just you can't not hear about Tom Brady and, LeBron James, which I also think is just another amazing thing about female athletes. We're doing all this in play. Obviously, my, fiance Sue Bird just retired this year, but played into her 40s on literally a fraction of the budget. I'm if I could spend $1 million on my body every year, I would play till I was 52. It's impressive, but it's not that impressive. I mean, you have literally like an entire entourage of people like doing every single thing that you need to do. So shout out to women's athletes there. But it is a little like, I just hear so much chatter all the time. It kind of becomes like this lazy default of like, it's in part true because of course, as you get older, risk of injury and, as I said before, I won't be able to have the same role as I did before, but it kind of becomes this lazy thing. Like, can she do it because she's old? And it's like, okay, well, do it. It's like, am I like with a cane on the field? Because if that's the case, no, she can't do it because she's old. But I think just like trying to still evaluate people's game gets in the way a little bit sometimes. I think with male athletes also it just becomes this like default thing that it's like once you reach a certain age, this is like all anybody wants to qualify everything with. So that's a little frustrating, but also it's like I'm still playing. So I guess they can just, keep asking if I'm too old. And I ask myself too, I'm like, how are we feeling in this body? And certainly things, take a little longer to warm up and everything's a little bit more difficult. But I think you get smarter and you understand your body better. And, you go through sort of changes in your body every like 4, 5, 6 years, which is interesting and fun. And I feel like you can find different ways to train and still stay at the top of your game.
Megan, we always like to end on a light note. So, who has the better shoe collection, you or Sue?
Sue definitely has the better sneaker collection. She's, a bona fide little sneakerhead. I have a different range than Sue does. I like to wear more like loafers or dress shoes or boots or stuff like that. So I have more in that category, but it's definitely Sue. She's her shoe collection is almost unrivaled.
I just had a vision of like a Nike loafer for the retired soccer player.
I know.
I'm
going to work on that with them.
You could be the face of the retirement loafer. Megan Rapinoe, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait for next year's Women's World Cup. And thank you for everything that you have done for pay equality, LGBTQ issues, and the sport.
Thank you so much for having me on.